What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Studs and Duds, an NFL player review series where I'll be talking about the rising and falling players around the NFL via the lens of my own custom community Madden roster. Guys, if you're still playing Madden 25 and you want the roster, just search that franchise guy in the file share. Also wanted to let you guys know I finally am going to have time to start a new rebuild. That'll be on my Twitch tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, so I'll see you guys there live. And those will be uploaded on my gaming channel, TFG Plays. But without further ado, let's get started with Studs and Duds. In the AFC East today, the Buffalo Bills going first. And for their first half of the season super stud, basically the player I want to highlight most for the Bills here, we have Christian Benford getting a +4. What a huge season for Christian Benford, and for the Buffalo Bills to have Christian Benford step up like this as a legitimate number one corner on the outside this season. He's been targeted just 29 times this year, only 16 receptions allowed, 142 yards, 1 touchdown allowed to 3 passes defended. They needed him to have this leap because you look at that cornerback room, you like the slot, you like Rasul Douglas as number 2 on the outside, but they needed someone that could actually handle number 1 wide receivers, play tight man coverage, contest those go-to throws to number 1 wide receivers, get the defense off the field, and that has been Christian Benford really all season. Outside of the Jets game, he did have a rough day against Garrett Wilson, but yes, Benford stepping up, really completing that cornerback room where you got a more lockdown type of coverage corner here in Benford. You've got a playmaking, ball-hawking zone corner in Rasul Douglas, and one of the best slots in the league in Teron Johnson. It has been really the foundation for this Bills defense. Playing better as of late as well with Teron Johnson back into the lineup. But we are going to talk about the offense first, and then we'll come back to the defense. Going up this week, a +1 for Josh Allen. He has really evolved his game in a very respectable way. This is not the old Josh Allen that we got used to, that gunslinger mentality, pushing the ball downfield, throwing picks every week seemingly. No, in fact, Josh Allen has just 4 turnover-worthy plays through the air this year. He has definitely put the ball in harm's way on the ground. 8 turnover-worthy plays via fumbles, so you want to see that get cleaned up. But his processing, his decision-making has reached a level that I don't think the biggest Josh Allen apologists, and I was a pretty big one back in the day, but the biggest Josh Allen stands probably couldn't have seen this coming, where he is just picking defenses apart. He's had games like last week against Miami where he's out there with like an average depth of target of like 3.7, and it's not that he can't push the ball downfield. He's taking those shot plays when it's necessary and at the right time when the defense gives him high percentage looks down the field. But he is just consistently threading tight window throws into zone windows, taking checkdowns when he needs to, and has really become a true nuisance to try and defend. There's a little bit of Tom Brady to his game with the way he's playing right now. And then, of course, when they need a bucket, when they need him to make a big play, he's still doing that for the Bills. In last year's season, Josh Allen absolutely would be looked at as an MVP this year. Unfortunately, Lamar is doing what he's doing, and it's going to be tough for Josh Allen to win that MVP. But the Bills are 7-2, and without Allen being the engine behind this entire offensive system that has been so impressive this year, and this offensive shift to more of a lull you to sleep with the run game and the underneath throws and then bring in the hammer when it's necessary, it would not be possible without Josh Allen. So he's getting a +1. And then another big part of this whole thing working for the Bills is the run game, and it's both these running backs. But we'll start with James Cook, a +2 for him. He's entering top 10 running back in the NFL territory in my mind. And I just never thought that was going to be in the realm of possibilities for James Cook. And we are living in kind of the world of the smaller running back. We've seen this emergence of guys like James Cook, Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs. And I've talked about this in the past about how my mind has shifted on these smaller backs, that even if you are small, and James Cook is, he comes in at about 190 pounds. If you are running with determination and speed, Well, force equals mass times acceleration. And when you are accelerating and as fast as a guy like James Cook, you can still run with some semblance of power and brush off arm tackles and have some contact balance, to distribute some force back in the other direction. You don't necessarily have to be 230 pounds like a Ray Davis, is more like 220. Now, in shorter areas in a phone booth, yeah, James Cook can't necessarily, fight for 1 or 2 tough yards all the time, but for the most part, he has turned into a very complete running back. Again, overall, in the picture for a top 10 running back in the league, he's not just bringing explosive plays, but he's really impressed me with his vision, the acceleration like we talked about, the contact balance, and just been a very efficient runner when he's been healthy. And then you've got Ray Davis, who always was going to be the perfect complement to a guy like James Cook. I compared him to eating your vegetables, and that's exactly what he's been, although last week against the Dolphins, he rips off like a 70-yard touchdown reception, making guys miss in space, juked Marcus May out of his shoes, shown a little bit more juice in there, but he's just looked the part. Just kind of your classic no-nonsense day 3 running back pick. A lot of Tyler Algier in his game, so it's limited touches, but he did have one start with James Cook out. I think he neared 100 rushing yards. He definitely looks like a perfect complement to everything they've got going on, so he's heading in the right direction. But then we'll talk about these wide receivers. I did feel the need to lower Amari Cooper. Anybody that's followed his season would say this is necessary. This is primarily for what he did in Cleveland, where the Browns traded him for a reason. He was not content there, but he was playing the worst football in his career, led the league in drops at the time they traded him to Buffalo. And he's continued to just basically not be the same Amari Cooper. He hasn't quite settled in Buffalo. He had that big touchdown catch the week they traded for him, had a drop that week as well, though. I do think he can settle in and still be a very good trade for the Bills and potentially even earn a contract extension here. I really like where this could go, but he did need to come down for how he's played this year compared to where he was last year, where he was a legitimate top 5 receiver in the league last year. He's been nowhere near that this year. So -2 for Cooper, 87 to an 85. But then Khalil Shakir is going to go +2. He's just had such a steady season. Was a good take of mine in the Bills deep dive to say this is the guy you want on this offense. He really embodies everything they want to do in this quick hitting passing game. Such a good route runner in the short to intermediate. He wins tough catches. He's 2 for 3 on contested catch looks this year. They don't get a lot of them because they really do a good job getting him open in space, and he sits down in zones really well. But he's got 14 missed tackles after the catch, so he's been dynamic in that way. He never drops the ball. I think they were showing in the Dolphins game last week a graphic. If you tally all of the highest completion percentage seasons going back to like 2009 in terms of completion percentage when targeted for a wide receiver, Khalil Shakir was the top 2. So, he's catching everything, just super efficient when they've targeted him. So, gotta love what you're getting from him. You can't take it away from Amon-Ra St. Brown in terms of who the best true slot wide receiver in the league is, but there are a lot of parallels in these two guys' games. But then Keon Coleman is going to go +2. It's been kind of up and down. There's been some frustrating moments with him. Last week, the ball bounces off his hand, it gets intercepted. He hasn't always been on the same page with Josh, but there have been plenty of moments where those back shoulders, those have-to-have-it big-time throws have been there. He's done a really good job using his size, winning those tough catches, and he's been really nice after the catch as well. Looking like a good first-round pick for the Bills. Just a guy that just passes the vibes test, too. I think he's going to be really good. He's off to a good start. Just has to clean a few things up. But then on the offensive line, this group has been really good. Spencer Brown especially, thought about making him this team's super stud. This is a guy that has had a lot of growing pains as he's developed as a freaky third-round pick out of Northern Iowa for the Bills, but he's really settled in and looks the part. This reminds me of the Jordan Mailatas and Brian O'Neills, these freaky athletes that you give them time to grow and they can really turn into real players. I think that's kind of what we're seeing in plain sight with Spencer Brown. He's been one of the best right tackles in the league. has been a huge contributor to the run game, but also giving Josh time to throw. Next to him, O'Cyrus Torrence in year 2. He's coming along steadily. I wouldn't say he's been shut down or dominant, but he has been much more efficient in terms of pass blocking, pressures allowed, and all that stuff than he was last year. I like Torrence. It's been maybe not the immediate stud that he could have been. I think he was my number 1 guard in that draft. But he's still been very solid and heading in the right direction. And then this Alex Anderson has been like a part of a rotation, a lot of like 6 offensive line looks. He's come in. He's been run blocking, getting in the picture here. Undrafted player out of UCLA, I believe, deserves a little bit of love there, +1 to round out the offense. But then defensively, not quite as many names standing out to me on the Bills. And of course, we already talked about Christian Benford, but Greg Rousseau has really broken out, in my opinion, this year. And I know he's had good years in the past, but in terms of like just dominating one-on-one reps, showing a little bit more of a pass rush repertoire to his game instead of just getting off the ball, pushing guys back, he has really maximized that inside swim move counter off of the bull rush, and he also has a really good push-pull rip move. He's really mixing in his punches and getting after the quarterback. He's 15th in the NFL in pass rush win rate this year, and it's been interesting with Greg Rousseau because when he came out, I was one of the only people that was like, hey, this guy's a first-round talent. Like, I know he didn't do anything in that opt-out season, the COVID year. People didn't like that he didn't really have any pass rush moves coming out. And I was like, I mean, give this guy some time. He's got a little bit of Rashawn Gary to him in that way. But in the league, I've been a little bit hesitant to kind of victory lap on that take because he's been a good player, but I don't think he's really emerged as like a legit one for the Bills. It's trending more towards that. I mean, he really is taking a leap forward in terms of how often he's able to win one-on-ones, and that's just a huge deal, especially with Von Miller getting suspended. They've really had nobody else on this D-line able to get after it. Rousseau's been a godsend taking that leap this year, so he was another kind of super stud candidate. Unfortunately, the guy opposite of him, AJ Epinesa, they gave him a 2-year contract extension. He's really been nowhere to be found. He had, I think the Jets game, he had a really nice pass rush win, got around the corner, sacked Aaron Rodgers. I think he forced the ball out, if my memory is correct on that. But really outside of that, he has, again, just been nowhere to be found. They couldn't wait to get Von Miller back because Rousseau and Miller, you can definitely work with that. AJ Epinesa out there, he's more of just a rotational third, and he's going to fall back into that role now. But then linebacker Dorian Williams, love Dorian Williams. This dude's tape was so fun at Tulane. You knew when the Bills took him, they do such a good job with these linebackers. You knew he was going to be able to step up at some point. We're seeing that this year. Matt Milano goes down. The one saving grace was that opened the door for Dorian Williams to get this playing time and show what he can do. This dude just flies around, man. He finds the ball. He lays the lumber when he arrives. Hasn't been all perfect in terms of getting to the right landmarks and coverage. And yeah, he can be a little bit aggressive at times against the run, blow his discipline, but it has overall been, him making a serious impact in run defense. And he's not Matt Milano, obviously, but they've been just fine at linebacker with him and Terrell Bernard. So a nice +3 for Dorian Williams, who I do think is a starter in the future for the Bills post Matt Milano or maybe post Terrell Bernard. I don't know. Bernard's been very up and down this year, in my opinion. But then at safety, Damar Hamlin. It's kind of unfortunate that this storyline feels like it's been kind of pushed under the rug because he technically played last year, but I think it's more impressive that he's cracked the starting lineup and is playing pretty well. Hasn't done too much in the form of coverage. He did have that interception that landed in his lap against Trevor Lawrence, but that wasn't really him doing anything. But what he has done is something that this Bills defense does maybe as good as anybody, and that is tackle from the secondary. You look at some of these defenses like maybe Dallas and Cleveland in years past and say, how are those guys so bad against the run? Well, it's actually, in many cases, it's not the D-line and the linebackers. It's these safeties and corners are missing tackles and taking bad angles. Well, that's a huge part of the job that we don't always talk about. And Damar Hamlin has been incredibly consistent as a tackler. just 5 missed tackles to 51 total tackles. That's at 7%. That's really good for a safety. If you're under like 12%, you're doing a pretty good job. He's almost half of that. So almost exclusively for his tackling consistency, Damar Hamlin is going up. He hasn't really made his presence felt, but it makes an impact in the terms of not allowing big plays, and that's been a big selling part for this, big selling point for this Bills defense. And Taylor Rapp has also contributed to that. Taylor Rapp is right there next to him. He has just 2 missed tackles on 30 tackle attempts. He's missed a little bit more time, but that's 4.5% missed tackle percentage. So both these guys have been, by the definition of their position, safeties. They are not letting guys through that last line of defense. But Rapp has actually made his presence felt a little bit more as a coverage defender, had a monster game against the New York Jets, a couple of huge pass breakups. So yeah, the safety room has settled in after a rough start for this group. So there's your Buffalo Bills. Let's move on to the Miami Dolphins. Unfortunately, not a ton to talk about with the Dolphins. It's been a pretty lackluster season for this team, and not a lot of young players really emerging here, but that's not to say there's nobody to talk about. We've got Devon Achane is the super stud, a pretty clear choice here. I don't think anybody predicted that his rookie season was going to be a flash in the pan, but when you look at a guy that was just like historically efficient, this dude had 800 yards on 100 attempts last year and had big plays in the receiving game. With a guy his size, a mid-round draft pick, there were still going to be some questions on just how good this guy is, but he has really overtaken this backfield as the best player in that backfield, and it helps that Raheem Mostert isn't looking like he did last year as well. But yeah, he's just really good. It goes back to what we talked about with James Cook, the whole, force equals mass times acceleration. He's actually very strong for a small back. He breaks a ton of tackles. He doesn't truck you, but he keeps his legs running. He gets through arm tackles. He's really good. Stop-start ability too. He gets guys to dive at his ankles, and he can kind of step out of, ankle tackles as well. So there's just been a power aspect to his game, a vision and patience aspect to his game that I didn't expect out of Texas A&M, and I liked him in college, but I liked him as kind of a shot out of a cannon speed threat. He's been so much more than that, and he's been really the focal point of this passing game. I mean, let's face it, they just haven't done a good job getting Tyreek and Jalen Waddle especially going this year. But all of the different screens and design looks they give Devon Achane, he's a handful catching the ball out in the flat and doing his thing. So he's just been a super weapon for the Dolphins from the second he got here, and he himself is trending towards being something like a top 10 running back in the league. His running mate here, though, Raheem Mostert, is going to come down. He just really has not passed the eye test this year in the way that he did last year. And we are talking about a 32-year-old running back that has had a litany of injuries throughout his career. But you aren't seeing the missed tackle force rate that he had last year that was remarkable. I think he was top 5 in missed tackles forced last year. Nowhere near that. He's fumbled the ball twice, but maybe the most telling thing is his longest run on the season is 17 yards. That's been always at the bottom line on Raheem Mostert, is if you give this guy a lane, he can hit you for 40, 50, 60-yard chunks. You're not really seeing that long burst from him. So I still think he's good, and he's been solid this year, but heading into the year, I mean, I really made the case that this is a top 10 running back in the league getting better with age. It seems that last year may have been the sort of end of the road for that narrative, and he's more trending in the wrong direction now. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he can find that burst and be the beast that he is, because him and Achane together last year were absurd. They're not quite getting that 1-2 punch like that this year. And then Jalen Wright has stepped in with some injuries there and looked the part. I don't think there's too much to say here, but he's gotten some touches and been efficient with them. It's been a lot of those, kind of gimmicky Mike McDonald system things where they give him a jet sweep and a bunch of lead blockers, and he weaponizes his speed. But, he's done what they have asked of him, and I do think in time, Jalen Wright can overtake Raheem Mostert as the running mate to Devon Achane. But we do have to lower Jalen Waddle. He's just had a really rough year, and I know he's spent a lot of time with the backup quarterback in there, but it's not just that. He's struggled with Tua in there. He's 70th in yards per route run. He's had 4 drops this year. He had the big 63-yard touchdown week 1. Since then, he has yet to go over a 21-yard reception. They just haven't been able to get him going, and it really hasn't always been the case that's just because of the quarterback. He's been tighter covered. He hasn't been coming down with balls that he would in years past. It's just a -1. I still believe in Jalen Waddle, but it has undoubtedly been a frustrating season for the former first-round pick. Then Jonnu Smith has kind of stepped up as Waddle struggled to be the number 2 in this passing game. Jonnu Smith has kind of been that guy in the last couple of weeks. I mean, it definitely felt like a fit. Considering this team loves to have those heavy packages, the RPOs, the play action. They've never had kind of a juiced up athletic tight end. They've tried to find some guys in this mold, maybe like a Chase Claypool, or they brought in Isaiah Higgins, who they maybe shouldn't have let go. Arizona's doing good work with him. I think it was Isaiah Higgins out of Stanford. But they've tried to find these pieces, but it's never been quite right. Well, Jonnu Smith has been doing this in Shanahan-style offenses his whole career. So it's not a huge surprise, but it's been a while since we've seen him working efficiently, and he's definitely doing that. I mean, he's catching like 6 or 7 passes, doing some stuff after the catch and coming, not dropping the ball either. So a little bit of love for Jonnu. And then on the offensive line, a little love as well. Liam Eichenberg is getting a +1, 65 to a 66. He's had a lot of struggles since coming into the league for Miami. He's been starting at right guard, and he hasn't been a complete, utter liability, and he's actually doing some good stuff in the run game. He's in a contract year, so a little bit of extra kick in the butt for him. We'll see at the end of the season if we're talking about him maybe being a starter in the league or not, but he's been certainly better than he's been in years past, though this system does do a good job protecting offensive linemen with basically almost never getting into the drop back passing game. When they do that, I still don't trust Liam Eichenberg to win one-on-one in pass protection. But then Aaron Brewer, this was such a fun signing when they made it. He's a 280-pound center, one of the most athletic offensive linemen in the league, out of a small school. I can't remember what school he's from. But started in Tennessee for a long time and was always a good run blocker, horrible pass blocker. This was the perfect fit because, like I just mentioned, they don't get into drop back passing game very much. It's all play action, and they do a really good job at pulling these offensive linemen, getting these perimeter runs with all this speed. And Aaron Brewer is the perfect fit for that. There are a lot of highlight blocks from him that are very Jason Kelce-esque. Now, he's not the complete player that Jason Kelce is or was, but they've been able to weaponize him in a very similar type of way. And I'll stop short of any other Jason Kelce comparisons, but Aaron Brewer has a PFF run block rate of 84.4, really impressive season for him, has found a very good fit for his skill set here. But then just a couple players on the defense to talk about. I didn't have high hopes for this defense coming in, and with those edge rushers not available for this team, we're just not seeing too much to talk about for a unit that has a lot of veteran players that's been very, very average to below average this year. But Deshaun Hand has settled back in. He was kind of an early day, I think 3rd round pick breakout for the Lions way back when. He's bounced around. He's been okay. He's done a good job as a rotational run defender for the Dolphins. Deserved a little bit of love. But these veterans in the 2nd and 3rd level of the defense, David Long, Jordan Poyer, these guys are going to come down. David Long's actually having a very rough season. I think he can bounce back. He's always just a very polarizing type of linebacker, a risk taker, a guy that's missed a lot of tackles in his career. He's been a 16% career missed tackle rate, which is pretty high for a linebacker. You want that closer to 10. This year he's at 28%. So got to clean that up. And he's been really getting picked on in coverage, over aggressive, biting the cheese on play action, that kind of thing. So he's been a polarizing player for a couple years now. You're seeing the low ends of his play this year. I think that can regress back to the mean, if you will, but he did have to come down for how he's played so far this year. Then Jordan Poyer, also going to come down. 33-year-old safety, just hasn't been around the ball too much. It's not that he's been a disaster, but he's missing more tackles, giving up, a larger share of yards per snap. It's just, just a little bit too high there, 79 for a player changing systems, getting up there in age. I think people will understand that one. So less to say on Miami, but let's move to the New York Jets. A lot of red for the Jets, a lot of expectations, highly rated players that have not played up to their ratings this year, but some good as well. But we'll start on a positive note with this team's super stud for the first half of the year, Will McDonald, their first round pick last year. What a bright spot he has been for a defense that just hasn't been what you hoped. Now, granted, his run defense at his size has been as poor as you could have imagined at 235 pounds, and the run defense has been the biggest issue for the Jets. So take that for a grain, take that with a grain of salt. But he's been the probably biggest contributor outside of Quinnen Williams to their pass defense. DJ Reed's having a really good year too, but this dude's been all over the backfield, and his combination of pass rush moves is really fun to watch. He's got a nasty spin move. He's got great speed to bend. He has great length. At least he plays with it. I can't remember what his arm length was, but he's really good at getting those hands inside. He's got a little bit of pop in his hands, and then he's got a really good ability to kind of tug himself and rip towards the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle, where he has that great bend and ability to finish these sacks. Again, just living in opposing teams' backfields. He's been just a constant presence, swarming these quarterbacks. A +4 for Will McDonald. Now, let's talk about the offense. So I'm going to lower Aaron Rodgers by 2, 86 to an 84. Obviously, still had Rodgers pretty highly rated coming into the year. But kind of like what we talked about with Nick Chubb, the first half of the year was going to be kind of a litmus test for where he's at. I still think Aaron Rodgers has gotten way too much hate. I think he's playing right around the level of a top 10 to 14 quarterback, which is where the 84 rating puts him. You know, he's by far been not the problem on the field for the Jets. You can debate, the off-field impact of Aaron Rodgers that we've discussed, but, that's not really something we're discussing here in terms of how good of a quarterback is he on the field. He's still 8th in the league in big-time throw percentage. He's 4th best in terms of turnover-worthy play percentage, 15 touchdowns, 7 picks. He's 8th in passing yards. Like, you could argue based on the metrics, he's been more top 10, but the lack of play extension, some of the ugliness of his interceptions, some of the inability to beat the blitz that's been very uncharacteristic for him throughout his career, there's been some bad in there as well. And of course, he's coming down here too. But I think that's about right. 84 for Aaron Rodgers kind of puts him in that, again, 10 to 14 cluster, which is where I would leave Rodgers. And hey, maybe actually this could come back up because he seems to be settling in with Devontae and Garrett Wilson. So we'll see at the end of the season if he could go back up. But I think 84 is a solid rating. I'm curious what you guys think about that. Rodgers, obviously a very contested talking point this season. He is by far the most hated on player in the NFL, not named Deshaun Watson. But it's not just him going down. Breece Hall is going to go down 3. He really has had a rough season. I do think in recent weeks he's ran a little bit harder, but some of the just boneheaded drops, not converting on, short yardage situations where I don't think the run blocking's always been that bad. Sometimes he's bouncing around a little bit too much, and sometimes he's just, not putting his head down, getting the tough yards. He's had some games where he's just looked flat and unathletic at times. Again, I think in recent weeks that's looked a little bit better. He's had pass blocking gaffes. He's just been a very frustrating up and down player for the Jets. He has not lived up to his billing as a top 10 running back in the league and had to come down for it. But the other running back is running hard, running well. In earlier weeks, more so than recent weeks, he's cooled off, certainly. But Braylon Allen does look the part as a rookie running back out of Wisconsin, the youngest player in the NFL, 20 years old. But yeah, he's got some Brandon Jacobs to him with the size, the ability to lower his shoulder into guys, fight for tough yards. Seems they found something with him on day 3 of the draft. But let's talk about these wide receivers. Garrett Wilson, going to get a +1. He has been really even with Devontae here, he's been this team's number 1 wide receiver. He had his moments early in the year, some chemistry throws where he wasn't on the same page with Rodgers. He had that ugly drop against the Steelers that leads to a pick that kind of shifted that game. But in recent weeks, man, he has really been dominant, showing why I felt he was a player that I said the Jags should take him number one over Trayvon Walker. Like I felt that highly about the type of player Garrett Wilson is and can be, and I feel like we're really starting to see that here, and that could be transformational for this Jets offense. And then Davante Adams, he's going to come down, not a ton, and I do think the 89 rating on Davante is still obviously a highly respectable mark. But he had a down year last year at 31 years old, has had a lot of uncharacteristic drops going back to last year. They've still existed this year. Hasn't quite been the dynamic, explosive receiver that he was in his prime. Just one of these deals where I think 91's just a little bit too high. Still an excellent player coming off his best game of the year last week. So you're not discouraged by what he is for this Jets team. But in the 90s, wasn't quite right for Davante, so he had to come down. And then Malachi Corley, this is a Madden roster, the awareness had to take a hit. Woof, dropping the ball short of the goal line. What a boneheaded mistake, dropping him for that. But also, he just hasn't been able to get on the field and hasn't been able to grasp this offense. Clearly, Rodgers doesn't want him anywhere near the field because he doesn't trust that he's going to be in the right spot. That's a big deal for Rodgers. And you see him drop the ball at the goal line, and you're like, are you really grasping this thing? So I think that's warranted. But then on the offensive line, some good, some bad. It's kind of the story of this Jets season. But Tyron Smith, -3, similar to Davante. I think he's been solid. He's had some ugly moments, though, for sure. And he hasn't been what he was last year for Dallas. He had, I don't want to say a career year last year in Dallas, but he obviously was playing at an all-pro level for the first, 6-7 years of his career. Then he had some ups and downs for a few years and settled back in at a damn near all-pro level last year for Dallas. But they let him go. The Jets signed him. And he hasn't been an all-pro. He's been a very solid to good left tackle. Still a good signing for the Jets and all that. But did need to come down from that 87 mark, which is much closer to what he played at last year. Not so much this year. Then John Simpson at left guard. This has been a great signing. He's actually been arguably their most steady offensive lineman, the most durable, the most lockdown in terms of pass protection. You just haven't had to worry about him. He's grading out well as a run blocker. He's having a really nice year. This is a good signing. A player really ascending that seems to have figured things out after a very slow start to his career. You remember he kind of finally broke through as a full-time starter for Baltimore last year, but was not nearly as efficient in terms of pass protection as he's been this year for the Jets. So that's been a really nice signing. And then Joe Tippmann in year 2, the Wisconsin center. He's having a nice year. He's doing a lot of good stuff in the run game. Still a guy that will lose in pass protection. His technique has really been all over the place going back to Wisconsin. But it's been better in terms of pressures allowed and all that stuff. So definitely going in the right way for the first center drafted last year. And that rounds out the roller coaster of the Jets offense. Not quite as much to say on the defense. Of course, we already talked about Will McDonald. But really no other changes on the D-line. Quinnen's done his thing. Hassan Reddick only just broke into the lineup. And really, when you look at the rest of the roster outside of Jermaine Johnson, you didn't expect too much from that group. But they have struggled, to what you would have thought. But you look at guys like, Solomon Thomas, like a 69 rating. Javon Kinlaw, it was like a 71 after doing some small things last year. But I think it's more of an indictment on Joe Douglas's ability to build up a real D-line here than it is on the players themselves. These are not great players surrounding guys like McDonald and Reddick and Quinnen Williams, and those guys have really struggled, as you would have expected. But into the second level at linebacker, Jamie and Sherwood. I mean, say whatever you want about Robert Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich. God damn, can they coach up some linebackers? We've seen this time after time after time with these two guys. And Sherwood, a converted safety from Auburn, new to the position, has stepped in with Mosley missing a lot of time. And he's flying around making plays. Now, he's undersized. He's not the perfect complement to an undersized Quinnen Williams. So there's been some moments where he gets locked up in blocks and is a little bit Not CJ Mosley, not the impact in the run in between the trenches that you could have hoped for, but goodness, his ability to fly to the ball, some of these hits he's laying on the perimeter, he's been really in the right place in coverage as well. Kind of what you would expect for a converted safety figuring things out as a linebacker. So Ulbrich, he is the most well-regarded linebackers coach in the league, seems to have done it again with another guy in this mold. But then into the secondary, I am in a lower Sauce. You gotta. He's having by far the worst year of his career, the only just average year of his career. He's had some pretty ugly moments. He's given up some big completions. He's been tagged with a lot of pass interference, which the Sauce Gardner detractors have had a lot of fun with, because this is a very grabby corner, but this is a style of play that a lot of the game's top corners do have. But when you're the king, people are going to come for the king. And they've had a lot of fun highlighting his grabbiness this year. But that's not to say he doesn't need to come down. Like, he's been an above average to good corner this year. I don't want to say he's been bad or anything like that. He's just had bad moments. It is a reminder that trying to play corner at an elite level every single season in today's NFL is damn near impossible. But in Sauce's case, we hadn't seen him look human. Basically, he had been just in a tier of his own in terms of shutting guys down since he came into the league. Well, this is kind of reminds me of Pat Surtain's season a couple years ago, where he knew he was still good, but he had a rougher season. I think Sauce is kind of having that here. So not going to panic, but that tier split of Sauce and Surtain as the top two corners in the league is much tighter. Surtain having a monster season. Surtain's at a 95, Sauce at a 96. Some of these other DBs are playing well, though. And DJ Reed, by the way, is having a really good year. I've got a ton of respect for DJ Reed. I think I've got him rated as the best number 2 corner in the league, so he's playing up to that. I didn't really feel the need to raise him even further. But Tony Adams, the safety that's been developing here, has been much more around the ball than he was last year in his first year starting as an undrafted player out of Illinois. He already has 5 passes defended, which is as many as he had last year on twice as many snaps. Definitely he's a good athlete back there. Probably a guy that fell under the radar, like based on his athletic tools, probably shouldn't have been undrafted. They found a nice player there, and he's, ascending towards being a guy that they could consider paying as like a legit starting safety. He's having a really nice year back there. And then Isaiah Oliver, been a nice pickup as kind of this flex defensive back, play a little slot, a little strong safety. He's tackling really well, contributing, to the run defense from those dime looks. Sometimes teams want to run it on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10. He's done a good job cleaning stuff up and tackling underneath throws. But yeah, nothing crazy, 72 to a 73. But this role makes sense for Isaiah Oliver. He's played a little safety, a little slot corner, a little outside corner. He's never really settled in as a starter in any of those roles. But you just make him a flex defensive back. It makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, Greg Zuerlein, Greg the Leg. What a disastrous season. The Jets have 2 more wins on the season alone, if not for Greg Zuerlein missing kicks. So he's released, but we had to at least shout out him going down and the bad year he's having. And then we've got the New England Patriots. A lot of players to talk about. This is one of those teams, kind of like the Broncos and the Chargers, where a roster in transition in many ways. You're going to have a lot of under-the-radar players playing, some ups, some downs. But that's the beauty of this series, is to highlight these guys that nobody else is talking about. But their super stud for New England is a player that's getting talked about. Keion White having a monster season. Really just the perfect fit here as that hybrid end. You think back to some of the guys in this Belichick-inspired defense. It's very much still a similar system and concept here with Gerard Mayo, but you think back to guys like Trey Flowers and Dietrich Wise, guys that are penetrators, guys that can hold a gap against the run as a 4-eye, 5-tech, a 3-tech, just kind of flexed inside the tackle or head up on the tackle. Keion White has been such a beast. He's even played some stand-up linebacker, dropped into coverage. They do a lot of stuff with him. He was an edge coming out of Georgia Tech, but a big 275-pound edge. So his flexibility is a real weapon for this defense, and offenses just have to know where he's at, because he could be looping from any given direction. They'll use him as the disruptive player where he's there to blow up the guard and the tackles so that a linebacker or whoever can loop in behind him. And then he's been able to just win one-on-one reps this year too. They'll just line him up on a guard, say, go beat this guy. He's got a nasty combination. He's actually much more of a finesse rusher from the inside. You look at his profile, you'd think he's more of a kind of, pocket pusher, speed to power type. That actually hasn't really been unlocked too much. It's more like winning with swim moves and lateral quickness that a lot of these guards can't hang with. So he's just been a really lethal weapon that Jerod Mayo has utilized really well. Pretty easy choice for the player to highlight for this Patriots team. But let's talk about the offense first. I'm going to give a +1 to Drake May. I do think he's playing well. Frankly, this would have been a +2 if last week's game against the Titans didn't exist. You definitely saw some rookie moments in there, some throws he'd want back, especially the one in overtime. You got a chance to win that game. He's forcing it down the field into double coverage. You just don't want to see that. So some more ugliness, some more turnovers showing up last week. But overall, the game has not looked too fast for him in an ugly situation. This is not a good O-line. These receivers are not playing well. And he's elevated this offense, and for the most part has not gotten overwhelmed. Sometimes you see this, these quarterbacks come into these bad situations, they aren't able to produce, their confidence sputters. That has not happened to Drake May yet, and I think it's a huge testament to his skills. But the scrambling has been insane from Drake May, like even better than I remember at North Carolina, and I liked his mobility a lot, but he is really killing teams with his legs, and they're going to have to make some adjustments there. That alone has really lifted up this Patriots offense since he's been in there. Absolutely have to shout out the game-tying touchdown in that Titans game as well, where he had to buy probably 10 seconds, throws it back across the field for the touchdown in the perfect spot. I mean, that's a big-time play. That's like, Kyler Murray, Mahomes, Lamar stuff that he did on that individual play. So definitely encouraged by Drake May. Probably would have been a +2 if not for some of the sloppy moments last week, though. But then a lot to talk about with these wide receivers. These guys are just not stepping up. They're highly drafted, close to a first-round pick. I think it was, 35th, 36th or something like that. Jalen Polk out of Washington. Hate to rain on the Patriots fans' parade here, but this was just, in my opinion, so early to take this player. I did feel like he was one of the overrated products coming out of that dominant Washington offense. I think he's a solid player. He can still be a good player. His game reminded me a lot of Dontavion Wicks for the Packers, kind of a physical receiver with some toughness. But, man, they spent a very high pick on him. They were hoping he would be the go-to number one wide receiver here to pair with Drake May. I think they really were hoping that. And it hasn't been anywhere close to that. He's actually really sucked. Has to come down here from a 70 to a 69. He hasn't been able to get open. DBs have been able to bottle him up. That was a big concern I had on him, was just not a great athlete, not a great route runner, didn't have a lot of separation on film. But that's not so much a surprise. What's crazy is he's got 2 drops, and they've been trying him in contested catch situations because that's what he did in college, was dominate contested catches. 3 for 11 on contested catch looks, just has not been able to out-muscle defenders for the catch at the next level. So you don't give up on him, but there certainly were other directions I would have gone with this pick, and that so far has aged out. As he's also been kind of aged out of this offense. Just 34 snaps a couple weeks ago, 9 snaps last week. Not sure if he left with an injury or if he really has been just kind of put on the back burner here. But let's move on. We got Kendrick Bourne, kind of one of these placeholder ratings for a guy that's coming off the injury. He is coming off his best game last week against Tennessee, so I still think he can settle in as a useful player, but hasn't been very dynamic. Even when he's been on the field, just 0.55 yards per route run. That's really low. So just a little bit of a reduction for the aging vet. And then Tyquan Thornton, he's been phased out as well. I definitely had some hopes that maybe Tyquan getting to pair with a quarterback, not just Drake May, but Jacoby Brissett as well. Quarterback that can actually unleash the deep ball, push the ball downfield, unlike Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. They just haven't been those guys. but it's just not working. He really just doesn't seem to grasp the position. He struggles with contact down the field and has really been phased out here. So -1 for him. Keyshawn Boutte, on the other hand, has settled into a role within this offense. He's shown some really good stuff. Has the big touchdown catch in Drake May's debut. He's made some big plays for this team, but he's also had some brutal drops. If not for the drops, this would be more of a +3 or a +4. But there's just been some frustrating moments with him as well. Even on the interception from Drake May that ended the Titans game in overtime, Drake May never should have thrown that ball. He deserves the blame for that play. But you could make a case that Boutte, like a better wide receiver, would have tracked that sooner, realized it was in trouble, and adjusted towards the ball to help break that ball up so the game doesn't end in an interception. So some of the awareness moments, some of the drops haven't been great for Boutte. That's always been an issue for him going back to LSU. But the talent's there. He's been able to get open and make some big catches. So I'm excited to see kind of what this means for him. Him and Jalen Polk now with the same rating here. Not that matters for real life, but kind of emblematic of him emerging into that role as one of the top targeted receivers on this team. I will shout out Demario Douglas. He's playing well. I love Demario Douglas, so didn't feel the need to change him. Got him rated as a 75. I think he's played mostly up to that, though he did look really good in that Titans game, so I at least wanted to mention him. He is playing well, just kind of that undersized slot wide receiver. But Hunter Henry has actually been the most reliable, good receiving option on this Patriots team. He looks somewhat closer to the old Hunter Henry that once upon a time was like a top 5 receiving tight end in the league. I'm not saying that's where he's at, but he's shown a little bit more wiggle in his routes, and after the catch, he's been really consistent in terms of contested catches. He does lead the team in contested catches and targets. He's 7 for 12 this year. That's really good. So a nice kind of bounce back season for Hunter Henry, who hasn't had the best go at it the last couple of years. But then on the offensive line, Vidarian Lowe has actually been pretty solid at left tackle. Not great. He's had some ugly losses, but for a guy that you looked at and said, oh God, they're starting Vidarian Lowe at left tackle heading into the year, it hasn't quite been that bad. He's been an adequate placeholder left tackle, but a guy that has always looked the part, an underwear Olympics favorite type of guy where you look at him and you're like, man, he's got the length, the size, the movement skills. If he can figure things out with his technique, you could have something there. And he's had some ugliness with his technique in years past for sure. And even within this season, it's still coming together. But this is the type of profile that you look for a franchise left tackle. So I'm not saying that's who Vidarian Lowe is, but it's been certainly better than you could have expected. A +3 for Lowe, 65 to a 68. And really likewise with Michael Jordan. This dude keeps getting chances because of his athleticism. Presumably, he's probably a pretty good dude if he keeps getting all these chances. Like, I don't know how many teams he's played for at this point. It feels like it's been 5 or 6. But when they announced that he was going to be starting at guard, again, I was like, oh my God, they're going to have him and Vidarian Lowe in there next to each other. But he's actually been all right. Again, not crazy good or anything like that, but it hasn't been a total turnstile. They've found a couple of guys that have had their struggles, but are seemingly learning from their struggles. 2 guys that definitely have the traits, right? So, I'm not saying these guys are the future starters of this team. You can't hang your hat on that. But it is good to see that these guys have been okay for this offensive line and have at least given Drake May a chance on a lot of dropbacks. But then over to the defensive side of things, a lot of under-the-radar players here, starting with Jeremiah Farms. Been a part of this D-line rotation, done a good job stopping the run. And then Jacqueline Roy as well. This was a guy that I liked coming out of LSU. Was a 4th-round pick by the Vikings. I don't know why the Vikings keep letting these guys go. They let Kairos Tonga go. They let Jacqueline Roy go. Roy is showing what he did at LSU. You let him get off blocks, stop the run. He can do that. So both those guys have been a part of the rotation and been pretty solid. And then Daniel Ekwale, who's been around here for a long time, he's having a really good year up front. No Christian Barmore. They've had those injuries, and they needed someone to step up. He's done that. He has really made an impact defending the run He's had a couple pass rushes in there as well. He's always been a guy that's shown his flashes, but getting much more consistent playing time and paying it back to the Patriots here at 30 years old. So 3 very under the radar players making an impact up front. But then Anthony Jennings, he continues to just be straight up one of the maybe 5 to 7 best run defending edge players in the entire league, which is what he did at Alabama. He's been a great fit in New England, really from the moment they started playing him, which wasn't right away. But in recent years, he has been genuinely one of the best tone setters and edge setting players in the entire league in run support. So he continues to climb for that role. On the flip side of this, Dietrich Wise is continuing to head in the wrong direction. A couple years ago, he had a monster career year, but he's been kind of steadily coming down from that over the last couple of years in this series. Just not making an impact in either phase, needs to come down. But then linebacker Christian Ellis, they've had injuries galore with this group. Familiar last name? Yes, this is the same Ellis family that has 4 brothers in the league. You've got Caden Ellis is a great linebacker for the Falcons. Jonah Ellis, rookie edge rusher for the Broncos, getting a little vote of confidence with them trading away Baron Browning. They have, I think it's Noah Ellis is a nose tackle that was around the league. And then here, Christian Ellis emerging for this Patriots linebacking group. He is flying around, man. Really making an impact in run defense. And what he's showing as a blitzer, just an underrated athlete, has climbed up for this opportunity. The type that I wouldn't be surprised if he could carve out more of a starting role long term. I've just been really impressed, and the bloodlines obviously help his case there. But yeah, he's definitely been a diamond in the rough addition for this team that needed somebody to step up. Bentley has not been available for this team. Taki went down for the year, I think, as well. So they needed someone to step up. He has done that for him. +4 for Christian Ellis. But then Christian Gonzalez also could have been the super stud, but I wanted to shout out Keon White because he's a little bit more of a surprise emergence. Gonzalez, we figured he would get back healthy and climb the ratings this year. He's done exactly that. He just checks every single box you would look for in a number 1 corner, and he's had some dominant performances this year too. He put Devontae Adams in a box. They ask a lot of him, and he has had some moments where he's given up yards. It's going to happen when you're playing for a team that doesn't have a great pass rush and you're a young corner, and they're asking you to be Darrelle Revis out there, but they really are just treating him like a shutdown number 1 corner. And he's mostly lived up to the billing. He's a fantastic young corner. It's truly incredible that they got him 18th in the draft, that Emmanuel Forbes got taken before him. Like, man, what an indictment on Washington. That's just brutal to look at. But hey, the Patriots benefit for sure. And then the slot corner, Marcus Jones, has had some really good moments. He's had some losses as well, as it tends to happen. But, dude, his athleticism is just so insane, and he doesn't back down from a fight. He sees some bigger wide receivers, and he'll go toe-to-toe with them. He can play man coverage. He's a really good zone corner as well. Great at, just good ball skills. What he's done as a returner for this team. He's just a really nice defensive back to have on your team. And then they seem to have found another guy here, Del Pettis out of Troy. Someone that was not on my radar at all, but Pepper's done for the year here, and Kyle Duggar has missed some time too. So Del Pettis cracks the 53 and has gotten on the field, and he's playing like you would want an undrafted safety to play. He's flying around, hitting hard. He's played a bit of a starting role here for this team. He's played 154 snaps already this year, and he hasn't missed a single tackle on 18 total tackles. So, he's holding up that end of the bargain. Hasn't really done much from a coverage perspective quite yet. 0 plays on the ball, but he's only been targeted 4 times for 3 yards, 27 yards. So it's not like he's been some liability in coverage either. So yeah, he's been a nice little find there. Probably someone that could hang around as a backup on this team. And then both the kicker and punter, Joey Sly and Bryce Baringer, have had fantastic seasons for this team. Special teams that have plagued the Patriots for a couple years now. They've gotten things back on track with this group. But that is going to do it for your AFC East studs and duds. If you guys could, please hit that like button on the way out. If you haven't yet, I really appreciate it. Again, I will be streaming Madden tonight on my Twitch, doing a Saints rebuild. So I'll see you guys for that at 8 p.m. Eastern. Let me know in the comments down below if you think I missed anybody or I'm wrong on any of these adjustments. But I appreciate you guys for watching. And we got one more of these tomorrow until we take a break from Studs and Duds until the end of the season. But yeah, we're out of here. Thank you for watching. Peace out.